Now I'm going to take you through various examples. You'll need to look on here. Without me explaining it, this becomes completely meaningless. So that's one of the reasons. I keep changing my examples as well. But this one has been. Does anybody know what Bowdon is? Anybody? Cheshire. Here you are, Deacon brought up there, yes, sir.
Next door parish, so
Yes,
it's Bowdon.
Bowdon. There you go. This is because I chose this parish because Cheshire have got all their tithe maps online. So you could actually ascertain, you could actually, by a bit of research at home, find that all the land and the liability is in Cheshire. You put your mind to it. Very good of them to do that. I'm sure that wasn't what they intended to do, but there you are. Now Bowdon was on the background. I chose Bowdon because that was the background of my previous presentation. And so the actual plots you're going to look at is the background of my previous presentation. This is a record of ascertainments. The ecclesiastical commissioners, as you can see, take a huge percentage of the liability. And the governors of Queen Anne's bounty. Some of you will have the governors of Queen Anne's bounty as one of your people in the record of ascertainments. In about 78 or 79, the Queen Anne's bounty was closed down and all their percentage of liability was handed to the PCC. So in Bowdon, you have the value of the chancel is £1,173 old pounds, 4 shillings and 10d, of which quite a lot is taken over by the church commissioners. So they've got this mysterious figure, 102,81578, for a rent tithe charge of 1d. So that is adding all the rent tithe charge up in that parish. The chancel is given that nominal value. Remember, this only encompasses this particular form of liability. The chancel has a nominal value of that. Most liability is on the church commissioners for a damage of £1 million. Imagine a chancel having £1 million for damage. Anyway, the church commissioners will pick up virtually all of it, but the balance will be on various landowners out there. So these are the two plots I was using as a background previously, 185 and 186. The joint liability of both of these plots together is £866.40 in modern money. So there's £1 million worth of damage. Each of those plots will bear 433 and 20p. There they are. Would you like to know where they are today? Yes. Would you? There you go. There. Very conveniently, in case you're confused, it's church fields. And so I chose these at random. There was no particular reason for them. And it's such a beautiful website, this Cheshire. And there you are. There they are sorted out. You notice some poor so-and-so happens to have land in 186 and 185. So based on £1 million worth of damage, in 185 there are 12 properties with a personal liability of 433. So theoretically, if there was £1 million worth of damage to the chancel, and the PCC opted to register the land, they could knock on the door of any of those 185 they felt they would want to do so, in Meadow Road, number 10 Meadow Road, I think I worked out it was, and they could knock on the door and say, here's your bill for £433, and go and knock on your neighbours for the rest of it. Also, if they happen to be choose one own the liability for both plots, you can knock on there, you give the door 2 bills of 433. But of course, having £1 million worth of damage to your chancel is a fairly remote. And since basically the church commissioners will pick up virtually all that liability, the question that even from a financial basis, would it make sense for that PCC to register the land? Personally, I would say probably not. Because you can imagine, because there's actually about 100 of those plots in Bowdon, each bearing tiny amounts of liability scattered from us, because people always think about Aston Canway and the people who became penniless because of the church. They think, oh, that must be the same as my liability. But of the 4 million acres of land, 3 million of them are this form of apportionment or liability. So in my opinion, the PCC would probably not register this land and put a portion on it. Example 2, in larger lots, this is just a brief flash really. Every so often you'll get this on a tithe map. You've got 527 is one huge, great big allotment. That could be there for myriads of different reasons. Quite often it's because the landowner really couldn't be bothered to pay the tithe commission to do the mapping of his land. And say, well, I'm going to be paying £20 a year in subdivided plots or lots of little plots. I'd rather do it in one big plot so I don't have to pay for the mapping. So what they did, they just did just one number. And you will find an occasional tithe house, you'll find a number that is repeated again and again and again in different places. That means that particular number goes on the tithe award or tithe apportionment, and you look at that. And sometimes these plots appear on the record of ascertainments. I was sort of looking at one the other day, which is plot number 15, which was 60% of the parish, and actually took 95% of the liability on one plot under the record of ascertainments. Because the liability is personal and several, the PCC could decide just to register one tiny fragment of that liability. So 527 took 95% of the liability under the record of ascertainments. You could just register one tiny little bit, and that takes all the liability for that particular field. Obviously, the owner of that field, as the law stands at the moment, could go to his next door neighbours and say, I want my share, because the church is tapping for £10,000. Could you give me your money? Now, I will tend to say this later, but actually, I have been exchanging emails with various solicitors, and it seems like a lay rector can register against another lay rector. So if you, as a PCC, opted just to register a fraction of 527, which might be really cost effective to do, you can find the land very closely marked, but the owner of that particular plot can then, because they become a lay rector, can then go ahead and register the neighbouring plots. Now, if you speak to the junior people at the land registry, they say they can't do that. And if you speak to, but I think the senior solicitors are saying because of the principle of personal and several, i.e. liability, is shared, that actually they can do it. If any friend of the liability, takes the liability of the whole field. Sometimes allotments will re-divided, and I noticed, I've never seen them before today, actually, because I've never seen the amazing things at the National Archives. I've always looked and researched in local archives. As you'll look at your map, you'll see some green lines where the plots have been re-divided up. And those are the re-divided plots up that the record of ascertainments talk about. Right. Example 3, does anybody know where apportionment is? Down there. Right, sorry this is so small, but in the beginning of the tithe apportionment or tithe award, it says at the beginning, lieu of tithes such as have been duly merged in the same lands, and such mergers have been duly confirmed by the tithe commissioners for England and Wales. Sometimes there is a schedule afterwards, and sometimes they say the schedule is stored elsewhere, and that's when I said the 290 boxes stored at the National Archives. to be frank, that's all you have to go to. But in this particular case, it's actually marked on the tithe apportionment. So the third schedule, there'll be several, quite often in tithe apportionments, there are a whole bunch of schedules. Normally you can duly ignore them, but in this schedule, specifying those lands in the said parish acts with 2/3 of parts of tithes of corn, grain, hay and wood, the greater tithes. As I said, every area of the country uses its own eccentric definition and part. And so here is the tithes of corn, grain, hay and wood, the greater tithes. Payable in lieu of tithes in respect of the same lands have been duly merged by respective owners whose names are also specified. So here, when sometimes actually in another schedule we might say the lesser tithes have been merged to the land when the vicar of the parish, it was his glebe land and he felt it's sin, paying himself his own tithes. So obviously he merged it. This lesser tithe is merged, the liability never continues. So anyway, I like the name, that's why I chose it, Thomas Dare. Thomas Dare, he owns Great Bowdon, and he's merged the land. There are 222 acres of merged land under his name. And there's Great Bowdon. Now, this particular tithe apportionment, the tithe commissioner has duly actually listed and identified. They do not always do this, particularly when there's a whole township, and the whole township is merged, and there are a lot of those. I mean, literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of acres of merged land. Like I said about down in Tavistock, when there are 10,000 acres of merged land, duly known to anyone. But obviously they're not annotated map. But this particular tithe commissioner was obviously a bit of a job's worth, and decided he was going to annotate and map them all out. So we have Great Bowdon. So there's all these acres of land. He's merged it all. And I chose around plot 341, the orchard. He merged the land in the orchard. That's 3 acres and 9 perches. 9 roots. And there we are. There's 341 next door to Bowdon. And you can see there. And there it is today. A modern map, the present is roughly where it would be. Now, as you can see, at 341, the land has completely changed around it, but the neighbouring plots haven't. If I was opting to choose to register land, I would probably choose not to register at 341, but one of the neighbouring plots where the walls and everything have not really changed at all since then. It'll be easier for a surveyor to prove that these are one and the same. Knocking. It's a place in Shropshire. I've been helping knocking for some time. Anyway, as it stands at the moment, halfway through, the owner is a clerical rector. The Reverend Robert Rinsell, clerical rector of the said parish, and owner of all the tithes, as well great and small, thereof of whom no liability. If the owner has always been a clerical rector throughout all of history, there is no liability. If the land, which may have carried the liability, for instance, it might have been a lay proprietor, gave the land to the clerical rector as the clerical rector, or even the incumbent, be it vicar or perpetual curate, the liability is completely extinguished. It is possible, though, that I know it's not true about knocking, that later on, going through the tithe apportionment, you'll discover there is a lay rector as well who's merged the land and the tithes. So you cannot know until you've looked at the tithe apportionment or tithe award where you actually stand. That is the sort of beginning and the end. If there was an enclosure, and that would also be noted in there. Sometimes there is, of course, no tithe apportionment because there has been an enclosure, in which case the Tithe Commission just issued a note which is stored in the National Archives. We're not doing a tithe back here because it's already been in the enclosure. We're not doing it, it's already been done. You probably, if you're exploring and investigating it, you ought to probably obtain that piece of paper or look at the enclosure wall itself. So you're knocking, there is no liability. Right, this is close to my heart, this one. This is enclosure of township of Water-Eaton. I have, as I said, 12 or 13 townships, and this is just one of them. This is where I started, this is where I cut my teeth this time last year, and Chancel fair liability. Anyway, when there's an enclosure, normally there is an Act of Parliament. And whereas the said Edward Monckton and Joseph Rye are respectively entitled to all the tithes, both great and small, arising from certain parts of the lands and tenements. So these two lay people were the tithe owners. Edward Monckton and Joseph Rye. The Monckton family in Penkridge were incredibly wealthy, and still are incredibly wealthy. They're one of the great landed families that nobody's ever heard of, but that still successfully retained all their land and their assets today. You know, his great-great-great-grandson. And he still owns the land. Anyway, it's later on in the Act, allotments to be made to improprietors in lieu of such tithes as payable to them. So the said Edward Monckton, Joseph Rye, improprietors of tithes, both great and small, impropriator, lay rector, and are duly going to be given such parts of allotments to be made in respect of such tithe of land, and full compensation for all the said tithes. So they were extinguishing the tithes in this particular township and transferring the liability into several little allotments. This, and it's quite the Act of Parliament, you normally get them from the parliamentary archives. It only costs about 12, 13 quid to get a copy. I say when you're doing research, often actually in the Act of Parliament, this is actually copied from the local archives, I have a copy there, but you can also get them from the parliamentary archives as well. And it is worth getting on, because it often explains, before you get into the award itself, which can be quite difficult to read, what's meant to happen. We use the phrase, what's meant to happen. This is what Parliament ordered to happen. So, the other part of the enclosure, is the Act of Parliament, and then you have the plan, or the enclosure map. The two terms are interchangeable, they mean the same. Here we are, it's quite a nice enclosure map. Here, I'll put the red line on my map. I'm not very good with this kind of thing, so I've got a mate of mine who's really good with to do these red lines for me, because I gave him a project because I couldn't do it, to lay out on modern land. It matches really well, doesn't it? If you knew which allotment it was, you could find it quite easily, I think. So that's, you have the Act, the plan, the map, and then you have the actual award itself. The enclosure award, and here you are. The allotments for some gravel, this is a standard thing, there's some gravel allotments. You have allotments to the Lords, the Honourable Edward Monckton. I don't know why he's honourable, his great-grandfather was a vice-count. I don't know how he got to be still called right honourable, probably because he had a lot of money. And Joseph Riley, in satisfaction for in lieu of, in compensation for his right and interest as another of the lords of the said manor of Water-Eaton, i.e. he got this particular allotment not for tithes, but because he was the lord of the manor. And then to the lords for cottage lands, the Honourable Edward Monckton. So the lords of the said manor, in lieu of satisfaction for the interest in the cottage land. And on any cottage would get all kinds of weird and wonderful things. Could be somebody telling me about somebody got a bit of land because he looked after the bishop's garden. You know, it could be anything. It could be some wild thing so that you've got it for. Anyway, because he's the lord of the cottage land. But what you're looking for is the allotment for the lieu of the tithes. But this enclosure commission forgot to put it in. He forgot to put in the land in lieu of tithes. And the reason he did it, and I spent hours on this, and I know which allotment it should be, but he didn't. Because the first enclosure commissioner, he died in office. His father replaced him, and then he died. And then the two assistant commissioners rushed in at the last possible minute to complete the job. And they did a bodge job. And they included the land in lieu of tithes, which is thrown in with the manorial rights. So they did not point out which allotment it is. Now, I've worked out the percentage, and I know which allotment it should be. But I cannot prove it to myself, so therefore, there's absolutely no way I can register this land. I think if I was a solicitor, I'd throw it out of the grounds. You cannot prove it. If it's not in the enclosure award itself, you cannot prove it. And therefore, after spending an enormous amount of time on this particular thing, driving myself completely nuts, I decided they made a bodge job, they got it wrong. And when you do Chancel liability research, that is one of the things that happens. You kind of like spend hours, it's never what you think it's going to be at the end of the day. Parish enclosure, strictly Berkshire. This is all on the internet, so it's fine. It's Berkshire for all their enclosure walls on the internet. So this last one was just a small township of my particular parish. It's a bodge job. This is an entire parish. I haven't got a copy of their Act of Parliament, maybe very soon. William Stevens is receiving awarded to Lieu in lieu of full satisfaction as to into all the rectorial or impropriator tithes. So Mr. William Stevens is receiving 33 acres and 11 roods on land in lieu of tithes. William Stevens, but impropriator tithes of the old enclosure, 33 acres and 11 birches. That allotment of land to this day holds liability for the Chancel. I have actually spoken to the PCC or the Ward Vicar, they're well aware of this particular issue. They have over here, just to show you, this is quite a very good map because it's unusual. They don't normally, on tithe, on enclosure wards, actually annotate it with the various allotments. It's normally just in the ward itself. So you've got, for the Reverend John Wetherell Vicar, for tithes. If it ever goes to the incumbent for tithes, be it greater or lesser tithes, there is no liability. And so the two allotments there for John Wetherell, the vicar, carry no liability, whilst this certainly does. And there are stats for it. But right, this is Mule Brace Mule. This is lifted from, which is linked on from my website, the 1936 equivalent of Crockford's. You notice the vicar and the impropriator and the patron, all one and the same person. This is one of the exciting places where Mr. E. Baffer had a small portion of corn tithes to remain to others. Mr. Baffer, he had an enclosure wall there, and he, instead of receiving land, he received corn tithes, corn rent rather. It's corn rent, it's called a corn tithe, which is normally termed corn rent. The owner of the corn rent, if they're still receiving it, it's a non-land-based liability, is liable for the upkeep of the chancel. But to be honest, in most cases, owners of corn rent have ceased to collect it. But it is still of interest if the owner of the corn rent was, shall we say, the Bishop of Lincoln or the Archdeacon. Theoretically, the owner of the corn rent is now the Church Commissioners. And if you can prove they knew about it, therefore they are responsible for the upkeep of the chancel. It's one of those things, it's an important question about that, but that is corn rent. In this particular case, the enclosure wall is completely irrelevant for them in chancel repair liability. It's all to do with merging of land. But if you've got foreign corn rents, you've got to discover where did the corn rent go to, who's is anybody still receiving it? And actually, in this one, you have to check that the actual enclosure award matched up with what it says on here. This is the thing, this equivalent to Crockford's was completely dependent upon the church wardens of 1828 collecting, doing their returns good enough. I don't know how good your church wardens are at doing their returns. In Lichfield Diocese, we're a bit spotty, to be honest. And so this is a really good source of this 1836 equivalent to Crockford's linked to my website is really good as a sort of initial glance what an issue could be, but it is it's just a hint really. The real answer is you just got to look at the awards themselves. Example, the next one is Brighton. Here you notice something the same thing is the haberdasher's company is the Ampropriator. But what they did, they kept the rectory glebe for themselves, but gave the tithes back to the vicar. So it's a very interesting case. I know they're sort of busy around trying to persuade haberdashers there to rely with the upkeep of the chancel. But you find that there's documents stored in the Shropshire archives of movement of glebe. If the glebe is rectory glebe, it probably retains a liability. And if after a certain period of history, I can't remember the Act, if you're moving rectory glebe around, you're meant to keep the ecclesiastical commissioners in the loop. So you have a reference to a swapping of land for rectory glebe owned by the haberdasher's company. And so theoretically, wherever this exchange, wherever this rectory glebe is now, the liability is for the upkeep of the chancel. Although, as I said, there is a legal opinion that says maybe rectory glebe doesn't carry the liability. My feeling is it probably does, but like much of chancel repair liability, it's a bit of a mystery. Right, Ampropriator, St. Peter's Wolverhampton. The Dean of Windsor. And the Dean of Windsor seems to have so much Latin, he's amazing he was. Anyway, the Ampropriator in the 6th is recorded being the Dean of Windsor. And obviously that should have fallen into the church commissioner's property. You should find out what happened to the tithe and the land tied to it. Was the land sold after 1840? This is a matter of date really, because if the church commission or ecclesiastical commissioners didn't exist until 1840, if it was sold after 1840 and the ecclesiastical commissioners owned the land, they will indemnify the current owners. And I know someone will tell me about that. Now, at one time they were being a bit more proactive about it, the church commissioners, and now you, as the PCC, have to be proactive. So if it was church commissioners' land, you might have to register against it, and then they'll send a nice letter, and then they'll contact the other landowners and say, well, this was bought by the ecclesiastical commissioners by my great-grandfather. And they should then write to the church commissioners, and theoretically they should indemnify the current owners. So what happened is if your chancel fell down, you would send the bill to the landowner. The landowner would then send the bill to the church commissioners, who will then give you the money. That's the way it should work. But as it stands at the moment, you have to be registered the land, and then the land would be protected. So, but if it was sold before 1840, so it was an early enclosure award, the church commissioners or ecclesiastical commissioners, it is nothing to do with them. They'll wipe their hands of it. So you have to find out what the date is. Did it fall into their property? This is sort of my research hints. The Wolverhampton one, which I alluded to earlier, was all to do with, there was a private act of Parliament of 1880, because the Wolverhampton clergy were being very naughty. And they were, I think the word was riotous and disreputable behaviour. And I just can't imagine Wolverhampton, but there you go. And what they did was the ecclesiastical commission, by act of Parliament, reading down the rectory, sacked all the rectors and the prebends of the place, put their own people in there, took the liability for the chancel upon themselves. Now there is actually other allotments of land that bear the liability for the chancel of Wolverhampton, and in theory the church commissioners could go be proactive and register this other land, but they, when I say they take 100% liability, they're not going to go around registering other people. I think you have to find out whether you've got enclosure documents, view your tithe documents and the links from St Michael's Cambridge website. And actually I'll send the links on to Keith, so maybe he can use the links directly from his little search on my website. It might be easier to search straight from Lincoln. Who can register? The PCC as a beneficiary can register the liability. Other lay rectors, it would appear they can register if the liability is non-apportioned. Obviously, if you are Mr. Smith and you've got 0.001% liability, and you're the only person who has that 0.1% liability, you can't register to the guy next door who's got an negative percentage. But if you share the liability personally and separately, then you can register it. If you go to the land registry, they're very helpful. There are 3 you have to find out who the current owner is, and then you can register it in 2 different ways. You can do it all yourself, or you can use a solicitor if this is the way you wish to go.